30 years later, that's some hits in Tim McGraw's birthday. All righty, let us roll into current events. So as we take a look at a very, very important election, let's put like a list of things that we want to do, right? Trump back in the White House, please. We'd like to get a majority in the Senate and take that out of Democrat hands, please. We have the slimmest of majorities in the House. I'm tired of being reminded constantly that it's a razor-thin margin in the House. We'd like for that to expand, and that means keeping every seat that we have, especially here in North Texas. I don't think we're going to lose anything. However, you got to have what are called some pickups. You got to take some Democrat seats, turn them into some Republican seats. 32nd District of Texas, North Dallas and upward. Used to be Republican territory. That was Pete Sessions' land forever. Now Pete's down in 17 in Central Texas. And because they redistricted that and kind of made it really comfortable for the ascendancy of Colin Allred, who was elected to District 32 and then reelected this past time by a really wide margin. Well, he's not running anymore. The question is not, can a Republican beat Colin Allred? Because Ted Cruz is going to beat Colin Allred for the United States Senate, but can a Republican beat the Democrat coming up in November? Well, the Democrats have their candidate, that is Julie Johnson, former state rep, and former Dallas City Councilman David Blewett is running against Darrell Day in the runoff on May 28th to be the Republican to try to take this seat back. Long wind up there, David. Very nice to have you. How you doing?
Good. Hey, thanks for having me.
My pleasure. So how do you do that? I mean, Allred beat, he won by like 30 points last time. I think everybody looks at this as a pretty solid Democrat seat. How do we prove those folks wrong?
Well, it's true. He won by a pretty wide margin 2 years ago, but there's elements of this that the Democrats messed up. I mean, they've nominated a far left extremist for their candidate. So that opens up some things, some opportunities for us, because the district may be tilting Democrat. It is not extremist progressive Democrat, which is what she is. The second thing is what's really happened, especially in East Dallas, where I served on Dallas City Council, is you have a lot of Republicans who haven't chosen to go Democrat. They've just kind of stayed home. They're disaffected. They've been marginalized on some things, and so they're sitting back and they're watching. And the argument for me is if we can unify the Republican Party across a full spectrum, get every single Republican voter. My big argument is there's no such thing as a bad Republican voter. We need everybody. Nobody can be left behind. And if we can be the more attractive candidate in District 32 for independents and potential swing conservative Democrats, there might be 2 or 3 still out there, then we can win this seat. It can be done, but it's going to have to be done with all of us pulling together.
Do we need a Trump wave? I mean, he's going to win Texas, obviously. Do we need do we need the Trump campaign to go well, to bring people along in kind of the wake of that, to help everything down ballot from Congress on down?
Well, I'm going to tell you that I'm going to need it. The Republican Party in District 32 is going to need it because, quite frankly, turnout is going to be our friend. If you look at how Colin Allred has won, he's won this seat, but he's won it with lower turnout. He really hasn't activated a lot of voters in District 32, and like I said, they're disaffected. So you have a pro-Trump, hard red wave, and that's going to benefit all of us. But in District 32, it'll benefit us quite a bit.
For those unfamiliar, Colin Allred is, while voting in virtual lockstep with Nancy Pelosi, has gotten away, and he's going to try this in the Senate race with Ted Cruz, as I'm just a Dallas kid, I was in the NFL, I'm just a nice guy. And by the way, which is very smart politically, and he has ridden that to some success. I take nothing away from anybody that can do that. But the voting record tells a different story. As for Julie Johnson, well, tell me, what do you perceive as the differences between Colin Allred, the Democrat you will not be running against, and Julie Johnson, the Democrat you will be running against if you prevail in the runoff?
Well, the Democrats are looking for a November election across, it's a national election for them, and they've got a handful of issues they're looking at. They're looking at abortion. They're looking at women's rights, identity. There's a whole bunch of things that they think on identity that they can run on, and Julie fits the bill on that. Colin was kind of a nice, attractive candidate, played the middle, like you said, and then voted the other way. Julie does not. She plays hard left. She fits what they want for the November election on a handful of issues. And again, that is not a good fit for District 32.
Let's take a look at things going on in the news now. I always, when talking to candidates, want to engage in a little exercise called "What would you be doing if you were in Congress right now?" The news is filled with, from American college campuses to the Middle East itself. What's your overall thought on that whole scene and what's going on there?
My thought on the overall scene is it's amazing that you look at the news all around the country, all around the world, is how far we've fallen in almost every element. And so what's happening out in Colombia, what's happening around the country in terms of protests, it really doesn't surprise me because things seem to be fraying. And we're trying to catch up with all the things that are falling apart. So you want to talk about economics, you want to talk about the border, you want to talk about wars across the world. I mean, everything seems to be spinning out of control. And so I'm not surprised what's happening. And when you look particularly about all the protests that are going on, I'm fascinated by this. I mean, a lot of people forget the timeline of how we got here. And Antifa has been around for a long time, and Trayvon Martin and some of the Black Lives Matter protests go back 12 years, 10 years. But people forget that back in 2020, when I served in Dallas City Council, Black Lives Matter protesters broke into Dallas City Hall. We were secured as councilmen and escorted out of the building by a military convoy. That didn't make a lot of news. Now, nothing violent happened, but that happened around the country. So the timeline going back to 2017 when Trump got in, 2020, George Floyd, you get into Black Lives Matter, you get into protests now. The thing that I find fascinating is the left has largely unleashed the idea of protests as political helps them politically. But they're losing control of it because the only way that it works is to have peaceful protests. And we've lost that, or we're losing that. So there's a timeline here and a direct connection of how this started years ago and where we are.
David Blewett is here, and he and Darrell Day are running in the runoff for the Republican nod to take on Julie Johnson in Texas Congressional District 32. Okie doke, got to touch the Ukraine page. How we doing on Adra? Too much, too much, too little? What do we do? What's the way out of this quagmire?
My argument on all these things is you have to have an objective and a goal. And honestly, I'm confused at what our goal is. We seem to be pouring money into it. And the things that I'm reading is that Ukraine is not winning. And so the strategy of pouring more money into it, I just don't see how it's working right now, and I don't like how they got it done. I don't like how Republicans and Democrats came together and funded something that benefits Biden and what he wants. I didn't hear a good debate about it, and I don't see a good goal for America and American interests. So I'm struggling with what to do here. I mean, I don't like an expansionist Putin. I don't like some of the things that are happening over there, but I don't see a good strategy of how we're going to address that.
I'll ask Darrell the same question when I have him on, and here's why, because it's a primary, so the key question is, what do you perceive as the differences between you? How would you guys vote differently, if examples occur to you, depending on which of you prevails in the May 28th runoff?
The big difference is I can win this thing because my vision of what we have to do to win it is more inclusive of the entire Republican Party. He's running a particular direction where he thinks that some Republican voters are less valuable than others, and I just disagree. Like I said at the beginning, we need every single Republican voter. We're going to have to flip this seat. It's a plus 10 Democrat district. We're going to have to be more attractive to independents. This is not a hard-right district where you can run hard-right and win. You have to be open, you have to be inclusive, and you have to be more attractive to the swing independent voters. And he has a different philosophy. When you get him on, he'll tell you what it is, and that's fine. I don't think we can win with his strategy.
Well, but since you're here now, and I will indeed, if I'm understanding correctly, does it seem like he is sort of trying to curry favor sort of with the MAGA Trump base and thinking, screw you if you wanted Nikki Haley? I mean, just not to put words in his mouth or for you to do the same. But does it seem like... He and I have had plenty of debates and forums where he's been very clear. We're both very clear on how we want to do this. He thinks you can run one direction, and the moderates and independents are unimportant, but you have to do it from his direction. I just look at the demographics of this district. This is not the kind of district that you can win without everybody on deck. And I've done that when I was on city council. I've proven that I'll represent everybody. I try to be an open-minded person to all voices. I am a conservative person, but at the same time, this district has to be represented by somebody who can win it for our side. No, it's funny. I talk about this all the time. Over in 12, where we're looking for a successor for Kay Granger, John O'Shea is decidedly more conservative than Craig Goldman. Goldman is probably more like Kay Granger, though, and it may be that may be the flavor of the district. I don't know. I guess we'll find out. So is it true? Is Darrell just a smidge more conservative than you are? But here you are to essentially say, look, that may be lovely, but not every district is going to give you Louis Gohmert.
I think he would say that he is, and I would argue that point. I don't think it's a race to see who's more conservative. It's a race to see who's more representative of what this district is. And he's just talking a different direction, going a different direction than I am in terms of how to do it. In terms of a lot of issues, there's not going to be a lot of daylight between the two of us. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's a pun, but it's just true. I am a conservative person. We have not disagreed on issues. What we disagree on is how to win this seat. And I'm a big believer that we need more Republicans of all stripes, more conservative and more conservative districts, more moderate districts. And quite frankly, Republicans who are maybe not as conservative as we like, we need to entice them to vote with us. We need to be encouraging. Persuasion is our argument. We don't need to be exclusive. And if you look around the country, there's kind of a civil war within the Republican Party amongst moderates and conservatives. That's not acceptable. That's how we lose. That's how we lose. So my whole strategy is about uniting the party under a big tent, umbrella, Reaganism, winning the seat. I'll be as conservative as I can for the demographics and the layout of this district, but this district is just not a hard right district. It's just not.
The David Blewett for Congress website could not be simpler. It is Blewett, Blewett, Blewett.com. All right, David, thank you. I'm sure we'll be talking to you. I'm sure we'll be talking to Daryl probably soon, and then have both of you back before we, Lord knows we got forever. Is this runoff just forever? Is this crazy? You got to run for 3 months?
Crazy. I've done runoffs before, and I don't love them, but it is what it is.
Yeah, indeed so. Play the field the way it's striped. David Blewett, thanks, yes, sir. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, yes, sir. Take care.
All right, Mark Davis, 850. Little Booker T and the MG. Jelly bread. All right. So there was David Blewett running to be the Republican to take on Julie Johnson in a heavily Democrat-favored district. I'll tell you what I'm going to do is let's take a look at her as they cruise into the news and out the other side, because while Colin Allred did comfortably win in this district, he was a certain kind of Democrat, and Julie Johnson seems to be different. So what kind of Republican best goes up against her in this district? Because as I've said, not every district is going to give you Louis Gohmert. David just pitched the notion of I'm sort of a broader tent guy, big tent guy, want to bring everybody in, portrayed his opponent, Darrell Day, who I think is going to be on very soon now, who might be, he fancies himself probably as the more conservative alternative. There are two ways to win this district. There are two ways for enough Republicans to show up. One is if it's not the most conservative district in the world, to be more broad or inclusive or whatever you want to call it in this district. The other way to do it is to get the real conservatives so sufficiently amped up and ready to go like, yeah, in kind of a Trump wave, that we make the district as conservative and as vocal about it as Darryl wants to. Which, and I don't magically know which is the exact best way to go here. I don't. I know I tend to, it's the old William F. Buckley adage, vote for the most conservative person who can win. So can somebody sort of pitching, not exclusively, but predominantly to the grassroots MAGA-style voters, can that win in 32? I don't know.